Good evening. Well, it's evening for us, and we'd like to welcome you to a session 224 on grief. It has a title, but we're just chatting today. With me, I am the Reverend Dr. Fatima Saleh, but really today just Fatima. I'm joined by my lovely sisters, Joe and Kalani, and we'll be introducing ourselves as we welcome you into this session. We do want to say that this session is hard. This conversation will be hard and deeply rooted in feelings. And so we're glad we're recording it. Number one, take your time. If you need to stop, do whatever. There will be a prayer that we will begin with and end with. And if that doesn't feel right to be invited into that, go ahead and fast forward, or any parts that don't feel, of course, we invite you to move in this as best as possible in ways that can be best for you. So with that, I'm just going to leave us and start us with an opening prayer or just a prayer for this meeting. I invite you to join us. To the God of tears, to the God of sorrow, to the God of joy, to the God of our grief. Walk with us through the valley. Walk with us in times of mourning and lament. Help us to feel the love of one another. Help us to feel connected in ways to our deep humanity in our experience. We ask that this session, our voices, our stories can move in the world and reverberate in ways that offer community and understanding. And we say that prayer in the name of a God that sees us all. Amen. So we're just going to go around and introduce ourselves. I've already kind of done my introduction a little bit, but we're going to move to Joe and then Kalani.
I'm Joe Overton. I am a member of the Sichambula Kota Oyate, which is the Rosebud Sioux in the federal name and what we call ourselves. And I am currently co-founder, co-director for a nonprofit that started during the pandemic called Together on Turtle Island. And it is without a doubt one of, no doubt for me, that this is one of the things that I was born to do. And it is an incredibly important work as we seek to embrace and in partnership with our Native brothers and sisters in an intertribal way. And yeah, that's me.
Hello, I'm Kalani. My family is Tongan. My mom's family is Swedish. My dad's family is Tongan. I am currently the director of FAO, which is the arts part of an organization called PICTAR, which is Pacific Island Knowledge to Action Resources. In the pandemic, we've been doing a lot of work in the community with specifically with COVID-19 victims, people like families who have contracted COVID-19 or have had someone pass away from COVID-19. So we do just resources, and it's specifically for Pacific Islanders in Utah, but it's open to anyone. So if you know of anybody that's having a hard time still because of the pandemic, some of the things that the organization that I work with does is housing, pays for housing costs or can get you in touch with people who can help you with your housing. We do COVID kits that have, anything that you might need if you do unfortunately get COVID. But really, we've just, as a community, we've seen so much loss, specifically in our community because of the pandemic. And so, one of the big values of Pacific Islanders is that we share what we have. And so, you know, if anybody has needs, we can share. And I'm sorry, I'm probably going to cry through the whole thing. So just expect it.
I think that's going to be all three of us, if I can speak probably for Joe. So there will be tears. There will be tears. I want to say that while the three of us will be speaking on grief, to speak a little bit about myself, I actually have come off 1.5 years of losing an aunt, a beloved aunt, my only aunt on my other side, who I was very close to, from COVID-19, a friend from COVID-19. And then I lost my uncle and my beloved pet all in the same amount of time. So much so, and then dealing also with the crisis of America. What is America? So the pandemic being one, the pandemic of COVID-19, the pandemic of racism in this country, the pathology all around. I think there was a lot of grief to be had, so much so that I took the month of June off to really think about even a financial risk, because I could not do the work anymore. I felt like I was just consumed by a grief on many levels. So much so that I didn't even really want to speak on this today, because I don't feel I've even articulated how heartbroken I am on so many levels. And I didn't know I don't think how many ways a heart could break until this last 1.5 years. And I feel like that's hard because you're trying to find words to like new heartbreak, if that makes any sense. And also for me, a part of the heartbreak is rooted in grief, rooted in hope that I put in things that were not, I'm going to say this really clearly, not worthy of my hope. And to have hopes dashed is a whole nother grief that I will probably be speaking about. And so today I come to you having lost 3 beautiful family members in the last 1.5 years, a beloved pet, and seeing my African-American community in particular devastated in numerous ways by this last 1.5 years and death being very present, so much so that my Puerto Rican grandmother said that she felt like death was circling us. So that's how I come to this today and speaking about it. And my beautiful sisters will speak about how they're coming, but that's how my soul goes at this moment. And so there'll be moments where I don't have the words, and I'm not going to rush them. I think it'll take me a lifetime to figure out all that this last 1.5 years has meant for me and how much I've lost. I think it'll take this country and a lot of us time to grieve what has happened on many levels. So I'll turn that to Kalani or Joe, whoever wants to speak about how they're entering into this space.
Joe, do you want to go first, or you want me to?
Sure, I will. I think like the first inkling I had about real grief and real death wasn't about me at all. It has been for a long time about friends losing children. Let me think. The first one probably about 35 years ago. And it was just, and has been so heartbreaking along the way to be there while a baby breathes his last breath, to be present when someone lost twins at 20 weeks, and to have them curled into my hands too, as we grieved for them. And then, you know, the years have gone on and there've been so many losses for my friends that I thought, oh, so God has called me to be a friend who knows how to grieve, a friend who isn't scared to talk, because I know not to say stupid things, and to just be with them. And I thought that's what that was until 8 years ago when our son was killed. And then I joined that brokenhearted parents. And there hasn't been a day since we lost our son. His name is still Thatcher. Hikante, which is my heart, is his Lakota name. And I miss him every day, every single day. There's yeah, and then 5 years ago I lost my mom, which has been really hard. And then COVID-19 has brought grief as a community in such a huge way. And at first it was the Navajo, the Dene people who were so ravaged by COVID, and to watch my teammates on the nonprofit lose so many people in their lives, uncles and aunts and grandparents. And it was just heartbreaking to be there. But then it came for us on Rosebud. And it was like death was just wandering down the streets and just pointing a finger and saying, you. And then they were gone. And things like losing a loved one and calling the funeral home to have them say, we have no more caskets. You know, the tribe wasn't able to pay for anymore because of all the loss. And to have somebody say that, to lose not just the people that you love, but then to lose your ability to grieve and do what you're supposed to do as a community. We have a way to do this. We hold wakes, we feed the community, we have our own way of doing the funeral and the burial. And for all of us to have that taken from us was just loss upon loss upon loss. And it has just been so incredibly difficult. And as Fatima mentioned, like about the racism, COVID didn't cause this. COVID ripped the cover off of the racism. There is not a marginalized group that did not suffer more from COVID. All of us more likely to get it, more likely to die from it,
Yeah.
whether you are Polynesian or Black or Hispanic or Native American, however you are in that community, and it has to do with the racism that this country was built upon, the land that was stolen from, the people that were enslaved upon it, the people that were brought here and continue to suffer at the hands of the colonizers. There isn't any of us. And like everything, they took everything. And it's just been devastating, really devastating. And the only thing that's kept me sane during this is my nonprofit work, to be able to do something good for the people in the middle of all of the loss and the grief and the fear. You don't know. Is it coming for you? Will you survive it? Will they? You know, pregnant family members who got COVID. And it's just been, honestly, a horror. It has been a real horror to watch all of this, and then to know that this isn't new. None of this is new.
So I'm coming into this space today having lost several people as well. In November of 2020, my father-in-law passed away. In December, I call him my brother-in-law. He's my husband's first cousin, but they were, in the Tongan language, there's no word for cousin. It's only brother or sister. If it's your If it's one of your parents, siblings, children, then the word is brother. So my husband's brother that my oldest son is named after passed away. And then in January, my husband passed away. And then in May, can't even remember, is it May or the beginning of June? So my husband's brothers have been kind of rallying around my kids, and my husband's brother's best friend was shot and killed as well. So we've had multiple very close losses in our family. And I feel like I'm coming to the grief, not just for myself, but also for my children who have really had a hard time with having multiple losses. And then, you know, like you said, on top of that, just so many communal losses as well. You know, in November, December, and January, our Pacific Islander community in Utah, I don't think there was a week that there were less than 2 funerals. And we're not a huge community to begin with. And so, like, just thinking about that, like how many families are, I don't know, I feel like grief feels very isolating. But just to know how many other people are also suffering, and missing people it's a weight on its own, you know, and especially because of all of the work that we do in the community, we get to mourn with other people as well. And that's, you know, it's a blessing and a burden because you get to love them, and also you get to feel how devastating it is when we just have loss after loss after loss after loss, and you see how widespread that trauma really is in our community, you know, and even the ones that are left behind. You know, I have one of my good friends was in the hospital on a ventilator for 2 weeks. He had COVID, and he said that he could hear the doctors talking about him like he was going to die. Like, well, when this guy's gone, we'll move, you know, these people around. And how traumatic would that be to live through that and then just have to live your life knowing that you experienced that, you know, and know it. Like he said that in the beginning, because he got COVID at the very beginning, that they were afraid to move the bodies because they didn't know what they were dealing with. And so bodies were piling up around him in body bags. And then to have people talk about you like you're next, it's just a given. And to live through that, like I can't even fathom the heartache that would cause and the stress that would cause. And then you just have to keep living. And I think that's the hard thing that the struggle for me is like, well, I'm not dead. So I just have to keep living. And also, how? It's hard. But yeah, that's where I'm coming to you from today.
I've been thinking about how both of you mentioned mourning and mourning with others. And I just want to say, it's not something we're ever taught. Like, what's the skill set? And why are we ever taught that as believers, as humans, how to sit in lament and mourning with one another, like as a practice, as a way of being? I think I'm so uncomfortable at grief. I've become far more comfortable with grief and sitting with people. But I noticed that Joe said how she had just walked along for 30 some odd years with people in these horrible grief-stricken moments and seasons. And Kalani, you mourning with those in the wait to mourn with those who mourn. And I've been thinking more and more that I don't know if we know as a people how to mourn with each other.
I have a thought about that.
Yeah,
You
please.
know, in the Tongan culture, funerals are extravagant, and they're like a week long, and they're hard on the family of the loved one that's lost, because so for several days, like when Finau died, my kids and I, we got dressed in our traditional Tongan attire, and then we went and we sat in this big tent, and families come in to pay their respects, and they bring things for our family, and then in return Finau's family feeds them, and so they leave with food, and so, you know, especially for Finau's sisters and his family, it's weird because I always thought of it as like a burden, you know, like it's so hard on the family. But I think one of the things that I realized, one of the beautiful things about having protocols in place to grieve as a community, is that it gives you something to do. You know, and there were so many things to do and so many specific ways to express your love for the one who passed away, and to receive love from those that loved him, and it was just incredibly healing to see the amount of people who felt influenced enough by him and by his life to come during a pandemic and pay their respects to us, you know. And one of the really touching and beautiful things for me was when all of my Mormon feminist sisters came, and you know, none of them are Tongan, and none of them you know, they got the protocol wrong. And they sat facing someone and then had to turn and scoot and face the right person and talk, you know. But it was such a blessing for me to be able to look at Finau's family and say, these are the people that took care of me when your son was in prison. These are the people who cared for Finau's children, who loved us, and continue to love us, and are coming to pay their respect to him because of their love for me and for his children. And Joe, you were there, and I appreciated that. But yeah, it's so funny because all growing up, I always felt like all of the cultural stuff just seemed like a lot. You know what I mean? Like, that's a lot of work. Like, why? And you know, it's funny because like even Tongan culture is just a lot in general. Like we're extra, extra, extra. And I used to always like be so annoyed with Finau because he could not hold on to money. He would just give it anybody that asked, and if you asked for $20, he'd give you 100. And I'd be like, are we gonna pay our rent with our smiles? Like what's happening? But he would always tell me, don't worry about it. These are the people that are gonna bury me. And he was right. Like every single person that he ever gave anything to, it came back to me and to my kids 100-fold, and his plot was paid for, his coffin was paid for. Like people came out of the woodwork that I didn't even know he had helped, to help him because he had helped them. And so I think in America, we're not taught to grieve, but some of us learn how. And in my little tiny pocket, I just was really lucky and blessed to be able to see what it really looks like to mourn with people that mourn and mean it in a communal sense, not just in a one-on-one way. And Joe, I think you probably have similar experiences, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. The Lakota people do a wake and it can last 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. And it always surprises me when Kalani and I talk because our cultures like mirror each other. And so in that time, the body can never be left alone. So somebody's there all night. And during the day, we are feeding everybody. The entire community gets fed 3 meals a day. So it takes a tremendous lot of work. And it's just after doing that for other people and then have them to do that for you, but there still is obligation on the family for things like someone's always there. You have to greet the people who come, make sure they have a place to sit. Do they have coffee to drink? For the elders, do they need a plate of food? And there's this constant, like you said, just these obligations that need to be met culturally, that need to happen, and ones that we'd been part of before, but then to have it be now you and it, but then to have that ripped away during the pandemic because it was too scary, and to not do the funerals or to do them very small due to the risk. And I don't, it's just been, and that's happened over and over again for all the Native communities across America as they've lost so many people. And yeah, it's incredibly painful to lose so many people, and at the same time to see that white America really doesn't care very much at all about us. And I mean that in a general sense, because then on the other part, to have all these hands reaching out during the pandemic to say, what can we do? What can we do?
Mhm.
Sewing community that sewed over 100,000 masks for the Native people out of their own pockets, and for different groups that were working with us that help pay for things and get supplies out, and to see that happen in the midst of all of this loss, it has been a weird juxtaposition of grief and loss and rage, against the federal government for what they have done to us, and then at the same time, this grace of these wonderful people who care and love, and to meet them and talk to them. And it's just it's been the weirdest time of my life. yeah, I don't even know how to express how strange it's been to have those two things meeting together. And I think Fatima said it the best. Maybe she'll repeat it about,
I think, when I was mentioning it about mourning and grief, I think it's the first time I ever missed funerals. I never thought I'd say that. I'm like, oh, I missed that I didn't get to move in a funeral, and be around beloveds and other folks who loved a human I loved. Um, and yet the thing about grief that I think, to know it on so many levels, and the weird thing about it is, for me, I'm glad you both shared cultural, deep rooted cultural ways of grieving with one another and grieving in community. That feels really right and beautiful in ways. Um, and I guess I was more mentioning and thinking about how hard it is for me. Maybe I shouldn't have put that out as a blanket term. How hard it was for me to sit in grief with others. I don't always know what to say, or maybe it's the religious part of me that wants to put a God coding on things that doesn't fit most of the time, and is pretty icky. Um, and I'm sure God would much rather I'm quiet and don't say anything rather than, some of the things I've said in grief, almost to, try to make sense of the nonsense, of the things that just don't make sense. And oftentimes loss doesn't make sense. And so maybe I was speaking more about myself, and reflecting on things I've said to make sense, and they've done more harm. And
You know,
that,
that's one of the interesting things that I've found is like the things that have comforted me when other people have lost somebody that they love, um, are not the things that comfort me in my own loss. And that wasn't something that I expected. You know, the things that I say to people, right? When I know that they have lost someone. Those are not the things that speak to my soul right now. And the other funny thing that I've noticed is that, and I think I've said this before, I probably made a Facebook post about it, but like it changes by the day and by the minute. And by, you know, like sometimes things that are extremely comforting to me in one setting, I'm so angry about on, 5 minutes down the road. So when you say, if he now is looking over you and your children, or he's watching over you, or he's your guardian angel, sometimes I take a lot of comfort in that. And sometimes I'm like, fuck that. Like, why is he not here? Like that doesn't feel comforting to me at all. And I don't know if that's just me and I'm just weird in that way, or if that's just normal, but I think it's very interesting how dynamic grief is, and how much movement there is just within me from moment to moment.
I think for me, and sometimes I feel really self-conscious because my biggest grief, like the grief about losing my mother, is very different of the grief of losing my 23-year-old son. And um, in the beauty of how you write about grief, Kalani, like I just keep seeing Thatcher in it over and over again. And I feel bad because he wasn't my husband. I wasn't, I got mine here 40 years, almost 41. And it feels unfair, I guess, to me sometimes, because I hear what you're saying and it really resonates for me, but it's always about Thatcher. And I don't know, it just, I struggle with that. But you just say some of the most beautiful things, and they just are, um, like, I just, I hate time. I hate it. I hate that it moves. It's like, don't tell me I'm closer to him. I am further away from his earth journey, and I don't want to hear that I'm getting closer, because it is hard here right now today. And to watch his children growing up without him,
Yeah.
and it's always something new. And it is so hard. I'm like going, we had his dumb dog because his girlfriend couldn't take care of the dog anymore. So we ended up with this really ugly half Shih Tzu and half pug. So she was super ugly. And Neela broke my heart into a million pieces to lose her. She was one of the last things that we had that was of them, that was their family, And why am I sobbing my heart about this stupid, ugly dog? It's like, it just was just like, no, you can't take, why? Why are you taking the dog? Like, do you have to take everything? Does it have to be everything, every last little part of who he was and what I remember? And I hate it. I hate it all. And sometimes I'm so angry at the weight of the journey. It is so heavy, and it can be so grinding, and I just want it to stop.
Yeah.
Yeah, make it stop. And it just is. And sometimes people don't understand when I'm really upset about it, and they are super uncomfortable because I'm so mad at him still being gone. Could he still be gone? Why? Don't tell me God has a reason. There's no reason. There is no reason. And I don't want to hear that there was some higher thing that took my boy. It just happened, and it was tragic and horrible and ugly and heartbreaking, and it continues to be. And don't tell me that he was perfect and God wanted him for an angel. He was less than perfect, and God did not. Sure, he is wreaking havoc in heaven, because he was not. Yeah, he was always his own self, and quite so. Yeah, don't tell me that he was not perfect. He is not. Um, and yeah, it's 8 years, and it's still hard, and I still miss him, and it changes all the time, Kalani, all the time.
I think that's what I wrote someplace that I just want to punch grief in the throat. I'm like, because it feels it it makes me feel I can't make meaning of it. Like I'll just be doing the mundane and it hits me. And I feel like it's stealth. And those like, I don't know, I feel like those bombs that are just hidden underground, and that's my grief journey. Like I'll just be walking, and all of a sudden this is explosion. So, I'm in the pharmacy, and all of a sudden I don't know why, but I'm like, and I'm filled with rage. And I remember being in the pharmacy and wanted to just knock all the medicine because it was too orderly.
Yeah.
I guess someone had just come in and said it all night, and I had the desire to knock it all off. I'm like, no, it's all messy. Don't even try and make life organized. And I'm like, I'm not well. I'm going to go ahead for a minute. I'm not well. And I just a couple of days ago, I had one of those. And what has happened is that part of my grief journey is I let myself fall apart. I'm just not so connected to the trope of being strong. I just don't want to have to be anymore. And I just feel like I get to remind myself of the trope of being a strong woman that's holding it all. I felt that was more confining and actually suppressing my grief in ways because I had to be strong. And so one thing that's really moved me in ways is that my children have learned to be receptive in ways to my falling apart. So I'll be just a couple of days ago, may have just been yesterday, but grief is a thief in
Time is
some ways.
different now, huh?
It is.
It's grief time. I say love time is different. Like people say, I fell in love and this and this. I'm like, it's love time. And I think because grief is bound up in love, it's on a whole new, like it's really on a different calendar. It's a whole new, I almost feel like it's a different solar system of time. And so I allow it to be such. I try not to place the confines of what humans have created as time, maybe,
I like that.
and allow it itself. It's a love time, and grief is wrapped up in a love time. Like, I don't know, how do you love a child who you've only known for 2 months, or a month or a couple of days, and you're like, I love this child so much. That makes no sense.
Yeah.
But it does, and so I allow it that. But I remember I started crying and I realized that my children had come into the room because there's really no privacy. And immediately my daughter and my son saw me and they're like, Grandma, you miss your grandma? And I said, yes. And they just hugged me. It was just no words, just this deep embrace. And they hugged me, kissed me, went about their day. And I'm like, okay. And one thing I've realized about my grief journey is that in the feelings of isolation and anger, I'm deeply reminded I'm still connected. And I don't know how grief does that. That's what I feel like. It's like, doesn't make sense to me. I feel really isolated in the grief, but then somehow in the cosmic supernatural universe of the life I live, I'm also drawn back in, somehow reminded I am tied in love to these people that remind me that I am still here, and I'm still present. And then I get mad at grief for that, because I'm like, what are you going to do? Take them too? And I love them, and that makes me even more vulnerable. And so it's interesting, the conversations I have around grief and the narratives I have and I do have a therapist who I think has well earned her money over the years dealing with me, because I'm like, I want to say a couple of things about that I have in the past, and I've been very keen to it. And I'm going to mention that I do see a mental health professional, and I realize that's a privilege. I have been on medicine before to help me deal with when my serotonin and my brain can't handle how sad I am about loss. And that I start, almost my body bears the grief of loss, especially people. I'm trying to verbalize it, especially around my grandmother, in a way, because I feel like someone loved me in a very particular way and no one will ever love me like that again, and that feels really horrible. I'm like, I've lost Nana's love in the ways I've known it, and that is irreplaceable. And it leaves a gaping hole in my love, like spectrum. And so I think that's been, and yet, to a universe or a God and a creator that keeps reminding me that I am loved. Whether it's hearing stories of people coming through with masks or showing up at a funeral. There's very rarely I hear a grief story that doesn't have these like really beautiful, like injections of deep love and witnessing and presence. I'm like, which I think the gift of presence is like this really beautiful thing in grief. So that's why I'm kind of nervous about it, because I'm like, a presence is a gift. And I just don't want it to be one of those gifts that is horrible, that you like white elephant gift. Like, that's a horrible. You're horrible at showing up at presents, and so I think that's where I'm at, and sort of what I feel are kind of sister emotions, that I've lost love, but it draws me, and someone calls me into love in a way that I can't explain. And there is joy to be had, and I don't know why. In that loving, like my children did that. It was a deep sense of comfort and joy that I'm raising humans that most times don't clean or do anything that I ask them to do, but can literally come and be like, and this. So I absolutely despise grief and loss. And yet, in many ways, I've never felt more connected and in love in ways that have surpassed my wildest imagination. Um,
Does that make you mad? Because that makes me angry.
of course it does. I'm like, I shouldn't have needed this to get this. Does that make sense? I'm all,
I always feel like, okay, so my dad is like the king of inappropriate humor. And I always feel like God has the most inappropriate sense of humor. Like, I'm going to take this and then I'm going to give you this.
yeah.
Yay! And I always want to be like, but why? Like, why are all of these great things a result of this horrible thing? You know, that's how I always feel, is like, thanks. But yeah.
We couldn't do this without that.
Yeah.
Right?
And
Like,
but the thing is, I feel like no. Like, I feel like the answer is no.
Ugh. Do you?
Like, I do. Like, there's so many things that have happened that I just feel like I get so angry that it didn't happen while Final was alive, and then I think it couldn't have. You know, like, there's so many things that he and I really worked for, you know, that he didn't get to see the fruit of it. But I don't think, had he been alive, the things that happened would have played out the same way. You know, it wouldn't have happened. And I think that's true of, you know, I've had other losses. My niece was in an accident, or had an accident, and passed away when she was 3 a few years ago. You know, my grandma that I was close to passed away when I was in college. And there's always these, like you said, there's just parallel blessings that come with grief.
Yeah.
That I just really feel angry about, but also I get, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like there's this thing that can never ever be fixed, but also these great things that could not have come about in another way. And I think that's one of the hardest things about grief, is holding space for both of those things to be true. You know, that we can have immense, unfathomable sadness and also joy. And have that be right and okay. Because a lot of the time I just feel like being like, nothing's okay. But that's not really true. You know, like when I started counseling, you know, grief counseling after Final passed away. And I remember the first couple of times, like, she was talking about, like, what do you see in your future? You know, what are some positives? And I was like, there's no positive in this. And I still feel that way. Like, there's no positive to Final being gone. But also I understand a little more clearly now than I did 6 months ago when he passed away, that the future looks different, but there's still joy to be had. You just have to have it around a big hole in your heart that no amount of joy will fill.
I had a really hard time acknowledging like the good things, because I was always worried that people would think that it would make it worth losing Thatcher over. It's like, how can I be okay with this? Like, no, no, there isn't anything. I don't want anybody to think that there is nothing good that has happened in my life that I would not give back to God to have
Right.
him back with me.
Yeah.
It's like, no, this isn't, it's not okay. And so I never wanted to say, oh, yeah, this good thing happened because Thatcher died. I don't
Right.
want there to be good things because he died. How
Yeah.
could there be good things? And it's this weird, like when I think about it, it's like when I was in school, and math is not my friend, me and math, but like that timeline that, that number line they give you. And so here's all these numbers, and then you learn about negative numbers, and you're like, well, that doesn't make any sense at all. How can there be numbers the other side of zero? And yet now in my life, it's like I've dropped this plumb line into those negative numbers, and I will never hit the bottom of it because I will never stop missing him. And I have never reached the limit of how much I love him. And that other part of losing him, like, there's no way, it doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't fit together, and it's all just kind of crazy in my head. And I've just had to like just give up and just say, it is what it is.
Right.
Some days I really, really miss him. I'm at the store and I go down and there's white glue. And why does that make me cry? Because my weirdo kid used it to make his hair go up into spikes. It's just like, and I'm standing here crying at the glue. Like, don't remind me, and there's other days I walk past it as if it never existed. Why? It
Right.
doesn't make any sense at all. Why I'm fine for 1 minute, not in another minute. One day I'm fine, and it's just, it doesn't make any sense in my head. And this whole last year and a half has been just more of that, like just added upon all that. And it just doesn't make sense to me. And I don't like things that don't make sense. I'm not one of those people. I want to know. I want answers to my questions. And when there are none, I'm not very happy about it. I just want to know why. Why? Why did he have to go? I don't understand this. Doesn't make any sense. Never has. I guess it never will. Oh, I want to know that.
I feel like that's one of the things that I pretty early on had to just be like, I'm never gonna understand this.
Yeah.
I'm never gonna understand why this happened or why, because just to backtrack for anybody that's watching that doesn't know a lot about my story, Finau and I had a really long, hard journey together, and he, when I was pregnant with our oldest, who's now 17, Finau went to prison for 6 years, and then he came out for 3. And then he went back to prison for another 6 years, and then he was out for about 2.5 before he passed away. And in that timeline, we had gotten divorced. I had decided I was never reconciling with him. Like, I had made my peace with that. And then he got out of prison and things just fell in line to where we ended up back together, and it was everything that I had hoped it would be 17 years ago, and things were fine. Like, I just felt like everything was we finally got on the same page on all of our stuff, and it was just like, I don't understand how that could be the end of it, like how you can finally get to a place where you can make plans and have common goals and be able to talk about the future in a way that is exciting and productive, and then that's it, like, and then he's just gone. And so I think, like, just acknowledging that I'm never going to understand why it happened the way it did, and why that why we worked so hard to get to a place that just ended, you know. But I think if you don't, like, just breathe with it and say, okay, that's just how it is, like, you can drive yourself crazy trying to figure out why, you know, like, it just is. And okay, where do we go from there? So, and I think that's true with, you know, again, going back to community grief. You know, I know that, Joe, you've had a lot of really intense grief just recently in your community, and Fatima, yours is ongoing, as is, well, both of you. But, you know, like, just knowing that, like, some things just make no sense, you know, and we can't change what happened, but we can still affect the future. I think that's hopeful. But also recognizing that we can only control what we can control. We can only do what we can do, and let that be what we put out into the world, and let that be enough. Because really, there's no such thing as enough. But there's only enough for what we can control and we can do. Maybe I'm rambling, but yeah, that's felt true to me.
Yeah, it's been, as you mentioned, because just, you know, last weekend we brought 9 of our children home to Rosebud, and it's like there are hundreds more residential schools with thousands of our children, and they took our elders. They would have been the elders. They took the ones who spoke our language. They took our culture. They killed our children, you know, and yet we got to bring them home. And that is so intensely good and hard at the same time. Like, to be able to bury them, to give them a warrior's funeral for who they are, and yet to know there's more missing. And like you said, it doesn't make any sense how anything could be so horrible and yet so incredibly beautiful and amazing to be able to bring them back. They don't understand it. It doesn't make any sense at all. And I think that's one of the worst parts. It's like, don't tell me that God wanted it that way. Don't tell me that he loved our children less, that he let those people kill our children. Don't tell me that. Because I can't stand here and take that. That doesn't make any sense, so don't tell me that. It has been really hard and beautiful, and all I can do is acknowledge both of them and cry for both of them, for the joy and for the sorrow at the same time. I'm so glad we got to bring them home.
what have you guys done to deal with everything? Or maybe I should say, give me your coping skills because I need
It doesn't really get better. Not really, I'm sorry. You just get used to carrying it. There'll always be hard days. Always. But then there'll be more joy and more laughter. And it eases in many ways, I think, just because you get used to carrying it. Like when you're playing baseball and you're in the batter's box, getting ready to go up, and you take 2 bats, because then when you put one down, it feels lighter, and it's very much like that. You just get used to it.
Well, that doesn't feel helpful, but thanks, Joe.
Joe's like, that's all I got. That's all I got.
I know.
That's all there is.
That's the worst thing, is that's just like, that is 100% accurate. Like, well.
I'm 100%, I think Joe just spoke so much truth that I'm sitting in, because I don't always like truth.
I know.
I'd rather to live in a delusional state at times. I think some of the practices, I've actually tried to take on grief in a very real way. Like I don't know, I kind of want to tackle it and like not let it. I think one thing about it is that I'm letting myself grieve. I'm not holding it hostage somewhere for fear that if I like lock it away, it'll seep out in all these ways that I'll bleed out on folk. So I'm intentional about letting myself. So if I'm doing the dishes and I start to weep, I let myself weep. I don't tell myself, don't cry, stop crying. I actually will sit down on the ground and have a good cry. I'll let grief have its way at times. I'm also, I feel like writing helps. I also follow, and I know this sounds weird, but I follow and move with people who speak about grief. Somehow their words like coat me in a way that is like a healing balm. And I love when Joe said that about your writing, Kalani. I truly feel that when Joe was saying how that connection, and she knows, it was your husband, and then, but and I think grief calls to grief.
Right. Sure.
And so I actually look for folk and will sit at the footsteps of folks who are allowing me the sacred blessing to walk with them in grief, because in that they're actually illuminating my own and allowing me to share in their words. And I feel that's pretty lovely, that I get to borrow the words of others because I don't have my own. And you've definitely been a part of that. I also feel like sharing stories is sacred also. So there's a couple of things that I'm kind of, I also like writing laments. I think the art of lament is really beautiful. And I love the laments of the Bible because they were all really pissed.
Yeah.
A lot of them. Like, where are you? God, nowhere to be found. And some of their ways, like strike them down or do this. You know, they were really, and sometimes they were way petty.
Yeah.
And I don't know, but lament the many ways it shows up in sacred text is really beautiful, like how it can be done in a million different ways. And nevertheless, it almost always ends with the sense of like, I may not understand all of this, and I certainly do not. I think Habakkuk does a really good job of that. Like, I don't, but I do know that I am loved and that I love a God, you know.
Yeah.
And even that sometimes I brought to my grandmother, who said, when I said to her, when I had to give a sermon after Ferguson, and I did not see God in any of this. I'm like, I think God has abandoned our people. Like, I just don't know what more we could do, how long we could plead for God to show up for us. Like, when will it be enough? When will our bloodshed be enough to like come down and start doing some work the work I feel like God should be doing. Not, you know, I love giving God tasks. Like,
Can we focus on me for a minute,
can we
please?
focus on you and our folk? Like, what are we doing here? And I remember telling my grandmother, and really honestly saying to her, and I said this in the sermon, how do you even worship this God anymore? Like, what has this God done for us? I mean, all our prayers as a people, is it really, I mean, do we really? And I remember just really laying my doubts and frustration and anger with the divine out for her. And she goes, you got somebody better, Tima? Who you got? Who you got? And I'm all, she goes, okay. Then don't come from my God unless you got somebody better. And so I shut my mouth. And at times I can still hear it when I am wrestling with God and really having it out. I can hear her. But I love that she also let me have my time to wrestle. Yeah. And there'll be times where I'm not talking to God. I feel like I'm mad. I'm like, I'm just not talking to you right now. Okay, we're gonna. And
we're on a break.
We're on a break until you can, you know. And I want to say that I've been really studying rage. And it has been one of the blessings in my life to study from like different religious aspects, whether it be Buddhism, Sikhism, about rage. And it feels really like, in ways, some would say, some of the people I study, but the gist of our rage is sometimes unmet emotion. Like when we have, it's a graveyard of our unmet emotion, is a toxic rage. The healthy rage is the one that we've been allowed. And I want to say this about grief in a way. I have people in my love circle who can rage really well. Yeah. If you ever have good, like I always say, get yourself 1 or 2 ragers. Yeah. Who like, I'll do it somehow. And for me, it's of course Eric. He's like, you know, he'll rage, and I'm like, oh. And somehow, anger and grief is I don't know how it's done, but it's somehow assuaged by someone else's like deep upset for you, and like.
I think that is so absolutely true. Like, and that's one thing that I feel like I miss from Finau, is just knowing that he would be so incensed about things that happened to me, you know, like outraged on my behalf. And that has also been something that has been incredibly comforting, is when people are like, you know what, you're right, this just sucks. I don't know why this happened. You know what I mean? And it's like, yeah. That's what I'm saying. It sucks, you know, and just having somebody there to be like, you know, a rage cheerleader.
Yes. Yes.
I've been mad in your behalf, Kalani.
You have, and you're one of my good rage cheerleaders.
Why did God take her love? Why? It doesn't make any sense. And I'm just
it doesn't.
And it's just like,
you're a gentle cheerleader though. Like, you're not the F-bomb dropping.
Oh no.
Which you need both, I think.
Right. No, I actually have the Orthodox Jews have goyim, and they're people that aren't of their religion that can do the things that they're not allowed to do. Like on the Sabbath, they can't turn the lights off and on. So I actually had a friend who was paid to be a goyim, going in and turning off and turning on things for them. So I have swear goyims.
Yeah.
And when I'm really upset, I'll say, will someone swear for me? And they'll just let loose. Because I don't swear. It's like, oh, yeah, thank you. I needed that. Definitely needed
I
that.
love
Just not
that.
very good at, I'm not a good swearer. So it's that bonding. And I think in so many ways, our sisterhood, that it has drawn us together closer. And it, once again, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but yet underneath it is that resonating truth that is just so incredibly beautiful.
Yeah.
And to be asked to do this with the two of you, just like, yes, I'll do that with them, because it didn't feel, oh gosh, I'm just going to say it. There are days I'm so done with white people. So done. It has been a freaking hard pandemic. Some really horrible things have been done to me, to the people. And I'm sometimes like, it'll be a miracle if I get out of this without hating white people, but and loving them on a case by case basis, because it has been really rough. Like, how do you bury 9 children that the white people killed and not be furious?
Yeah.
That they did that. How could they do that? They took our children. They kidnapped my aunt. She was 4. She could speak no English, and they took her away. They took my mom away. They took all her siblings away. It's like, how is that okay? It's not. And yet, like, oh, well, I'm pretty sure they all died of TB. Okay, thanks. That's helpful. I feel better now. Yeah, it's just been, but as I said, that there are places where our lives touch, and it's not all white people. I'm just saying, it's not, it is the culture, the federal government, the fact that this country is based on so much bloodshed and sorrow, and people don't see it. And it's frustrating, and it makes me mad sometimes. And yet at the same time, here we are, the 3 of us, and we are able to draw together and share some of these really common stories that are so heartbreaking, but yet our love comes out of this, and it's beautiful and amazing, and so grateful for that.
I'm grateful because I just want to say that anger is a part of grief. So it's to mourn with those who mourn. Let me be honest, be angry with those who are angry, cry with those, you know what I'm saying? It's all the ways in which we show up for each other in grief. It's really beautiful. I think we're coming to our end, but I just want to say that I'm grateful for and echo Kalani. I was trying to write down some of the things because I was trying to hold on to some of the beautiful words both of you were saying, but Kalani saying there was always a big hole there, and joy will be around it, but it can never really fill that. And that just resonated with me. It's like, and I love, Joe, that on that you were like, and the advice I give is that it doesn't get any better. You just learn to hold it. And I think that I've got to settle in to the companion of grief in a way that I've been still rejecting. I don't want it to be a part of my journey. And yet it is now a forever companion, to a companion I didn't have up until then. And then, and to now move it inside of my life and to realize that it'll be to me to the end, in ways, feels really powerful. And I'm grateful for both of you for giving words and sharing time. I think I know that this is pretty wonderful. Just so hard being sad and angry and frustrated and not making sense, and in a world where you want things to make sense. And yet I've decided the most of how I believe in love and relationships don't make a lick of sense.
Amen.
I just
Amen.
decided, I'm like, if you really thought about it, how much of your life makes sense? I asked myself that and I started crying all over again.
It doesn't make
Makes
sense.
sense.
You're so right. Dang it.
I'm like, this, and even the love I have for my children, and it really is just something very, I feel like there's just a supernatural tendency lining to love that will probably never make sense to us in this realm, and all that accompanies love. But I do want to say that to be acquainted with grief, I'm just reminded, and because that's probably my little Jesus training, but that one of the ways of describing Jesus was that Jesus was acquainted with grief and sorrow. Like it was like acquainted, like it was just, it's an acquaintance of which I know, like as if we're going to believe in a man, a holy man that walked the earth, but that one of the great descriptors of that man was that there was this intimate knowledge and understanding of sorrow. And I'm thinking that feels right and wrong. And I don't have any of the answers, so I'm really grateful, which is why I didn't want to do this, because I'm like, well, no, I don't know. I think I could cry for an hour and a half.
That's what I was worried about.
You want to see boogers and tears? I got all that for you for an hour and a half.
Oh, but you have so much more. Like, I feel I was really nervous about this also, but this has been a space of healing for me. So thank you. And thank you, Joe, both of you. Appreciate your words.
It's been incredibly sacred to share each other's tears in a way that is just so incredibly naked and vulnerable. And to be able to do it with the two of you has been just an incredible blessing. I'm so, so grateful that we are holding hands together in this grief journey.
And
don't let go.
I'm not going anywhere. The two of you, literally, I am grateful in many ways, because your Facebook posts, I want to say I know both of you first through Facebook. Let me be honest. Like social media, for all its ills, I got friends from there, and that it's been one of the most beautiful things. But both of you have literally narrated your grief journeys in such a holy way that it has offered deep healing in ways that I hope some way you know the measure of it. I don't think you probably ever will, but I hope you know that by allowing and moving in the words of your grief journeys, you invite us to something quite sacred. And for that, I honor you both. And it's actually how I've gotten over the years to know y'all, is in and out of certain grief and deep grief and seasons of it and the ebbs and flows of it. And I can say that when this year hit with such a, like, I felt like it was a 1, 2, 3, 4 punch.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get up from it. I reflected on both of you and how your words came to me. I'm with the sneaking suspicion that scripture is erupting all the time. That is just not written and bound in a version, but that we ourselves are narrating our journeys with the divine. And that in and of itself is a theology that gets to move and breathe. And for you both, creating a text around this in ways that allowed me to step into a fullness of grief. And I mean that in a ways of just a fullness of grief, not allowing myself to be like, Fatima, you don't have to do this. You could do that. There's a deep way that we want to track grief. And grief is like, I can't be trapped, sis.
Yeah.
Like, what you gonna do? What you think you got? You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like grief at times is like, I'm gonna sip my tea while you think you got control of this mess. And I'm like, "Ah," you know. So I wanted to just thank you both, honestly, for paving a pathway of deep connection and understanding grief.
I'm
And
so
before
sorry that you joined us.
Yeah.
Sorry, Kalani, that you joined in. This is a horrible sisterhood and truly horrible. It really is. It's beautiful and horrible.
really
It is
is.
horrible, but you know what? Like on the subject of writing it, like I always have felt, and this is true of, I kind of feel like my life has been like the live version of Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events. Because I just have like a series of very unfortunate events. But the one thing that has kind of been constant through that is I feel like if I can't use this to help other people, why am I like, it doesn't make sense that I'm going through it, you know?
Mm,
And so just in sharing
mm.
what I share, and maybe I overshare, probably I overshare a lot.
That's a lie. I'm gonna go
Don't
ahead
tell
and name that
yourself
for
that.
you.
Nope.
But I just feel such a tenderness for those who are also experiencing similar emotions and similar circumstances. And I don't really feel like I have had a lot of modeling of, like, I was completely unemotionally prepared to deal with this, you know what I mean? And
Mm,
like, I just feel like if I can give anybody else a sense of, yeah, this must be kind of normal, because
mm.
at least one person I know is having similar experiences. Like, I don't know, it gives me a little more sense of purposefulness in this nothing makes sense place, you know? So, but I appreciate, thank you for.
You'll be glad for the things you wrote down later. You'll be so
Yes.
glad. I read them later and I just think, oh, it, because I've been vulnerable when I wrote it and I wrote my truth, be
Mm,
able to read it again. And my mother especially wrote such beautiful things to me because I was missing Thatcher so much. She didn't know that her very words would be the ones that would comfort me in her loss.
mm.
And I'm so grateful for them. There just has been a lot of that. And I will say the first year's probably the worst, the hardest, because that's all the firsts of all the missing. And it's crazy the stuff you're like, you've got to be kidding. Another one, you know? But
Yeah.
then it gets a little bit better after the first year because there aren't any more firsts. Not really. You've done them all. So you've just sort of gotten used to it. But that's
Yay.
usually what I cry for when I first hear is somebody is at a lost meal, and I don't cry for them because we know what's coming.
Yeah.
We know it's going to be hard. And we cry and we pray with them and for them. They don't know we're praying with them, but we are.
I think that's one other thing that has been very touching. Sorry, I know we're supposed to be done, but like, I don't, after the pandemic, we haven't really gone to church a lot, but we go like, every once in a while. And I went, and, I reintroduced myself since it had been a little while. And afterwards, one of the sisters came up and was like, "Oh, it's so nice to put a face to your name because I've been praying for you." And, you know, her husband is one of my husband's relatives. And so it wasn't like out of nowhere, but it was just such a realization that there are so many people who have lifted up my family during this time. And people that I literally don't even know, that I didn't even know cared, you know, and yeah, it's just so interesting how many people you find actually are caring for you in ways that you didn't realize.
And Fatima, you've had like the worst year. It's so unfair. I think that's the hardest part for me is like going, this isn't fair. Why? Why? There's so many rotten people out there. Why aren't they the ones dying?
I had one of my old professors of theology. He's like, everybody's dying but the devil. Like, what? Like,
Yes.
why is this happening? Like, what's happening?
Yes, it's like, why? Like, it just, so yeah, it's like I've raged at God about the unfairness of it all for you. Cause like, you've got to be kidding me. Another one? Really? Just stop. Where's that enough button? Because just stop. Just let her be, please. Just let her get through this. Don't take
it doesn't.
anymore.
And I love that that's your prayer for me, because that's my prayer for myself. And and I'm grateful that someone's uttering it. And I realized that I hate to do a martial arts thing, but I've been thinking about it more and more, is that you feel like you get hit to the ground and they're kicking you when you're down. Like life is just like having its way with you. You're like, hey, where's the ref?
Yeah.
Can we like count to 10 and give me some time to get up on the ropes and get back to fighting? But I'm already down. I'm not coming back up. Like it doesn't feel like, and I feel like this year was just, and so I decided, because of grief and some things this year being such a deep loss of so many things, it's also challenged me religiously. Like I've had to really start to think about my own spiritual and how I'm viewing Christianity. So there was a lot going on. I felt like I could not enter whatever is next without really sitting and letting what this season, letting it roll over me and in me, like in the ways that it would call me to something different. Like I'm not the same as I was at the
Right.
beginning. I'm changed. I also believe that how I'm moving in the world will also be re-navigated. Like I'm not the Fatima of 2019. And I can't do even the same amount of work I did in 2019. I don't have the emotional capacity. It's probably why I decided to really set back and not do any more hardly race education DEI work anymore. I'm grief changed, loss changes me. And I get to re-navigate the world and re-enter it in a way that allows for that what that companionship looks like. And I don't have to be who I was now that I've lost. I am different. It's a cellular change, and it feels like a cellular DNA change. And so the way I'm moving will change. I almost have to yield to it. And I want to give myself time to breathe into the new yielding of who I am. I just don't have the capacity to do the same things I was doing. And I'm going to have to be okay with that. I'm traveling with a grief that takes up a space. And so thank you for saying that. And I did the martial arts because my husband's like, sometimes when you're down, there's some martial arts is just, you got to move in your ground game. I'm like, I got no ground game. So when life gets, I'm like, what ground game? He's like, you got to set your guard to all these things. I'm like, I got nothing. Like, you knock me out, I'm out. And I really have been thinking about my ground game. Like, what's my battle? What's my fight from the ground?
Oh, I love that idea.
Right? I'm not getting up for probably a little while So what's the fight on the ground, from my back, from my side? What does that look like? And I have to be okay that I might not get up for a little while. And when I do, I'm changed. I'm not the same person. So I think there's a statement in Black church, where and how I enter. And I think I'm re-entering. When I do, it'll be different. I'm not the same. I've lost so much, and that has it'll re-narrate for me how my call works, everything. So I think it's been that kind of year and a half, and I'm not pushing for the normal. There's no normal now. It is the new thing, what I'm going to do. So,
and when you're in there, you're holding or looking at all these broken pieces of who you were. It's like, how do I put this back together again? How do I make this whole again? And it looks so broken and so hard, and the pieces just slowly come together, and someday you'll wake up and it'll have all those cracks and things in it as it's being put back together, as you're being put back brand new, and you'll just keep walking, and it'll be that new you.
well, I feel like I had a glass that was like a tall drinking glass, and now I'm a shot glass. So all the broken pieces, and it just got together to be a smaller cup.
Making it more fun.
Just like, that's where I'm at right now. I was like a nice glass, whatever. And now I'm like, it's broken. I can only get the shards that like constitute a small glass. And I don't know what parts of my brokenness I'm okay leaving behind and not putting back into the new. Like,
Yeah,
maybe I don't need them anymore in the ways that I did. And so I think that I love that you use that metaphor. And I've been really thinking about it, Joe, in ways I'm going to let my life be changed. I don't get to try and resurrect something as if they're not gone. That's not an option. So I'm gonna let my life.
that's what I needed to hear.
You're forever changed. There's no going back.
And I think I try in grief, you try to resurrect something. And I told my husband, I'm trying to resurrect something. It's like Pet Sematary, that horrible movie. I'm sure no one's seen it, but I've heard. Allegedly rated R. That you bury these pets and then they come back all crazy and like really demonic. And I think that's what I'm trying to, like, I'll resurrect something and it's not going to come back anyway. Like, so leave it alone, Fatima. Leave it alone. And I'll leave resurrection to the God. But in the meantime, I'm going to have to know that I'm creating something new in the loss, and it'll be part and parcel of the loss. So I've got to have time to grieve that my life will not be what it was.
And like all things that are, when you're sitting there holding something that's so broken, it's jagged, sharp edges that cut, and you bleed, and
Yes.
And I don't know, maybe that's what becomes the glue that puts it back together again, different than where it was before. But yeah, you're a completely different person than you were before.
I am.
It's hard and beautiful at the same time.
I am. And we are. I am. We are. It's partly why I decided to walk away in some ways from teaching, necessarily always educating certain people about our people. I didn't have it anymore. That grief had taken the part of me that could give that grace to trying to understand my humanity and teach my humanity of my folk. And I no longer had it in the ways that I did. And I'm okay letting that go to people who have it, who have that space. Right. It's not me anymore, not in the ways I did. So some things I just had to let go, and I put them on the altar and said, okay, I no longer have space and emotional to do that. And that's probably why I call it the year of my no. I said no to everything. Hence why this panel, right?
Like, that's why you're here today.
Yeah. You can see how well my year of the no worked. I only said yes if I felt like it was in deep love and in relationship in ways that I could do it, because I realized I wanted to center back, and all my yeses had to be full yeses, and they had to be yeses rooted in relationship that met me. And I wasn't going to do any more yeses out of that. So everything was a no until I could give a full yes. I deserved that and I needed that. And so I'm grateful for this yes. And grateful for y'all. And is there any last things we want to say and put out into the atmosphere? This time, listen, my whole house is asleep, including the dog. The dog listens to me. Sometimes he just comes over here and falls asleep, which I feel like I'm kind of offended. Like, you come to just fall asleep, you know? Is there
Not
anything
that late here. Goodness.
boring? Dogs like, anything you'll want to leave for our folk before we check out tonight?
I think that allowing ourselves to talk about this and hold our sisterhood and be able to share that is, my prayer is that people will get that, understand that, and be able to honor that as they listen and watch. And that my prayer is that our words give them what they need.
I think I'd just leave I just have such an immense gratitude for those who have been willing to shoulder this immense grief with me. So yeah, I just want to put, that would be my final thought, is there's no limit to the sadness, but there's also no limit to the love that I've felt during this time, and I'm grateful for that.
Well, I'm just gonna bless y'all that are my two sisters and anyone who's been with us on this journey for the last little bit. I'm gonna bless you that wherever you are in the grief, wherever you are, may you be met with such an embrace that you know you are not alone, and you meet love there. You meet goodness there. You meet deep humanity there. That you find people who are willing to walk beside you and hold you up, who let you fall apart, hold you, get angry with you, and wipe your tears. And may we learn to live with loss. And that is our prayer for you. Thank you for being with us. Thank you so much for being with us. And we're happy to share our sisterhood with you.